हेलो एवरीवन, गुड मॉर्निंग। टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड, देखो ये टॉपिक अभी हम यहाँ पे नहीं समझेंगे। एमए इकोनॉमिक्स इग्नू से अगर कोई कर रहा है तो सेकेंड ईयर का एग्ज़ाम या फिर असाइनमेंट उसको मिला होगा। तो MSc 007 जो सब्जेक्ट है इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड एंड फाइनेंस, उसके असाइनमेंट का आंसर नंबर सेकेंड हम यहाँ पे देखने वाले हैं। क्वेश्चन उसका है, देखो, एक्सप्लेन द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड। टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड बताना है क्या है। क्लासीफाई critically examine the behavior of terms of trade as explained by प्रविश। तो यहाँ पे हम इस टॉपिक को समझने नहीं वाले हैं, हम यहाँ पे सिर्फ आंसर्स देखेंगे कि क्या है, ठीक है। टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड, ये टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड टॉपिक जो हम इसको दूसरे वीडियो में सही से समझेंगे, ठीक है। यहाँ पे सिर्फ आंसर बताया गया है, ठीक है। टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड कैन बी सेड टू डिनोट द रेशियो बिटवीन वैल्यूज ऑफ वन commodity basket in terms of another. These values, however, can be defined, measured, and aggregated in many ways. To put it straight, in international trade, terms of trade are the ratios of the price of an export commodities to the price of an import commodities. Terms of trade are sometimes used as a proxy for the relative, from नहीं है कुछ, for the relative social welfare of a country, but this is a technically equitable and should be used with extreme caution. An improvement in nation's terms of trade is good for that country because it has to pay less for the product it imports. In other words, it has to give up less exports for the import it receives. और इस चीज़ को मैं यहाँ पे छोड़ना है, यहाँ पे ये चीज़ नहीं लिखनी है, हमें इसकी जगह पे ये चीज़ लिखनी है। इन ए सिंप्लीफाइड केस, CASE केस of two countries and two commodities, terms of trade is defined as the ratio of the price of country must receive for its export commodity to the price of it pays for its import commodity. In this simple case, the imports of one country are the export of other country. For example, if a country exports $200 worth of export product in exchange for $100 worth of imported products, the country's terms of trade are 200 upon में 100 equals 2. The terms of trade for the other country must be reciprocal. 100 upon में 200 equals 0.5. When this number is falling, the country is said to have deteriorating terms of trade. If multiplied by 100, these calculations can be expressed as a percent, 200 and 50%. मतलब 200% and 50% respectively. It is countries' terms of trade fall from say 100% minus 70%. It has experienced a 30% deterioration in its terms of trade. नेक्स्ट इस बिहेवियर भी उसमें पूछा था टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड का, जो प्रविश एक्सप्लेन करना चाहते हैं, तो उसका आंसर होगा ये। द लाइकली इवोल्यूशन ऑफ द टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड, अ फीचर ऑफ क्लासिकल एनालिसिस वॉज resurrected in a development context by Prebish. In classical economics, scarcity of land would lead to an increase in primary prices and the terms of trade for primary product would improve. Next point, this would make further industrial investment profitable and economic growth would grind to a halt and the economy would reach the stationary state. In more recent times, the line of argument has been adopted by various environmentalists, starting with the Club of Rome analysis. Prebish argued that developing countries could not adopt a development strategy based on growth of the agricultural sector and export of the resulting higher output. Any attempt to raise the growth rate of an economy would require a higher investment rate and larger imports of capital goods, since developing countries do not have a large domestic capacity to produce capital goods, but export earnings would grow only slowly because terms of trade would decline as more agricultural goods were exported. Consequently, export earnings would be insufficient to finance the imports of capital goods, leading to balance of payment problems, and so attempts to raise the growth rate would be nullified. Pravish provide a detailed statistical analysis for this contention that the terms of trade of developing countries were deteriorating. He could not find data for the terms of trade of developing countries. So he calculated the terms of trade of the UK. Since the UK was mainly an exporter of manufacturers and an importer of primary commodities, its terms of trade would be the inverse of the terms of trade of developing countries which exported primary commodities and imported manufacturers. Ravish found that the terms of trade of the UK has improved between 1870 to 1938 and therefore conclude that the terms of trade of developing countries had deteriorated. This procedure adopted by Prebisch was criticized by Source-Brown. जो criticism था वो क्या है? It was not valid to the use of inverse of the UK's terms of trade as representing the terms of trade of developing countries because the UK's net barter terms of trade नेट बार्टर टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड का मीनिंग यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है. दिस रेफर्स टू द प्राइस ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट्स टू द प्राइस ऑफ इम्पोर्ट्स नेमली पी सी अपॉन में पी एम इक्वल्स पी वेयर पी सी इज द प्राइस ऑफ साउथ export and PM is its imports was not representative of industrial countries as a whole. Further, the UK imported primary commodities from developed countries could have declined, while price of primary commodities from developing countries would could have increased. Exports are valued on FOB basis and imports on a CIF basis. Then prices of imports into the UK may have declined because of a fall in shipping cost, since import prices include freight charges. But then the fall in import prices in the UK could occur without the fall in the price of commodities exported by developing countries. So the UK's terms of trade could improve without increasing the terms of trade of low developing countries. Next is the usual method of calculation of price indices doesn't take account of introduction of new goods and quality difference. Both apply mainly to manufacturers, thereby biasing the results. Apart from these criticisms, the Prebisch historical analysis economists found no evidence to support the case for the deterioration in the terms of trade in the immediate post-Second World War decades. Let's examine the criticism that the terms of trade of the UK was not representatives of developed countries as a whole. After painstaking analysis, Sprouse concluded the leap from the evidence of Britain's net barter terms of trade NBTT, short form, to inference about the relative price of primary products versus manufacturer in worldwide trade was not misleading as a direction through it gave an exaggerate impression of the magnitude of the deterioration. Sprouse also argues that there is no reason to suppose that quality improvement occurs only in manufacturers. Improvement can also occur in the mix of primary products. Consumers, for instance, could move from an inferior brand of tea to a superior brand which commands a higher price. Such a movement would show up in the data as an improvement in the terms of trade. Also, in later years, more processing of primary products occur in developing countries before the products are exported. Such processing may not lead to a change in the classification of commodities as primary and would again appear as the improvement in the terms of trade. Furthermore, price indices that try to account for quality changes have been developed for the later year. तो इतने से भी काम हो जाएगा. बाकी अगर थोड़ा सा एक्स्ट्रा लिखना हो तो ये लिख सकते हैं. एनालिसिस ऑफ दीज indices doesn't show any significant trend in terms of trade differences between indices that incorporate quality change from these that do not. Sprouse tried to improve the indices calculated by Prebisch, splicing together various imports and export indices and also taking into account changes in transport cost. He finds that the basic conclusion of Prebisch, a decline in the terms of trade of primary commodities, is situated even though the rate of decline is somewhat slower than what Prebisch had estimated. तो इतना ही था. आंसर ख़त्म. थैंक्स. हैव अ नाइस डे. बाय.